Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome back. Over the years, I have had lots of relationships, some good, some bad, and I think we can all relate to having what I'll call toxic relationships, bad relationships. I don't know what point the bad turns over into toxic. And, some you manage to steer clear of, some you manage to keep it at an arm's length distance. Maybe you need to keep them around. It might be a family member or whatever. And, so you can't really just totally dispatch them from your life. And then others you seem to put a whole lot of time into and maybe don't learn your lessons. I've had those relationships where it's dating or whatever. It's like, I can't believe I stayed in it that long. Today, I have on the program with me Kelly Siphon. She's a board-certified behavior analyst, and she's the owner of Applied Behavioral Happiness. Let me get that straight. And she's based in Wake Forest, North Carolina, and she provides behavior therapy for kids, families, and adults. And she's been on media around the world, from England to Australia. She's based here in the United States and does a lot with relationships and toxic relationships, and not necessarily professional relationships. But what she said just before we hit record was, people are people. So you'll run into personal relationships that are like professional relationships. So anyhow, Kelly, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
So when does a bad relationship qualify as a toxic relationship?
That's a really interesting one because it really goes down person to person, relationship to relationship. So for example, the way you might define a toxic relationship in a business setting would be different than, say, with your teenager.
Yeah.
Very different relationships, very different definitions. And the way that I help people come to that conclusion of, hey, is this a relationship that is fully toxic that I need to start looking at removing from my life, is looking from a value standpoint. Does this relationship lean into my values, who I want to be now, who I want to be in the future, or is it pulling me away from my values, who I want to be now, who I want to be in the future? If it's pulling you away substantially, you either need to make some large changes or need to start looking at something, or rather looking at removing that relationship from your life, if not forever, temporarily.
Yeah. Well, if we were talking about great relationships, I'd bring a lot of names into this, but when we're talking about toxic relationships, I want to try and keep it as neutered as possible. But, I have family members who I joke about it. It's like a gallon of milk. It's got a very short shelf life. And I've had relationships where I just need to get the hell away from it. And I'm sure I've been that toxic partner. I've been married 28 years, but I'm sure over I know I have. I mean, I think I've treated people unfairly, and I guess that's a good question to start with. Is when you start to notice that you're the butthead, how do you change that? Because it's usually a power dynamic. I mean, you're not treating your boss or that great client like that. It's someone that you have power over, and you're really taking advantage of the situation. And I guess it's easy enough to say just stop and change, but there's more to it. So I'll shut up and let you be the professional.
All's well. No, I think that's a really good point. If we always go around going, wow, there are so many jerks in my life, look at all of them, and then never look back and go, hey, remember that one time when I was a jerk? And then to either sit and perseverate on that, to go, oh my gosh, I was terrible that one time, and then fall into that anxiety puddle, you're just going to be stuck there forever. You're not going to make that positive change. So there's a choice that isn't leading you toward your values. It isn't putting you a step forward to being a better person. Or to go the other side and go, of course, I've never been a jerk. That one time it was really their fault. I wasn't actually a jerk. It was on them. I was being really responsible. Yeah, I said some terrible things. They deserve, that other side. You can fall into that puddle and get stuck in that same place of not improving yourself. So first recognizing that there was a moment, a pattern, a behavior that you didn't really like to see in yourself, or again, didn't align with who you want to be. And from there, choosing the more difficult action, because it's much easier to fall into, I'm the victim of everybody, that's why I did it, or I'm the worst in the world and there's no way I could ever change because I'm terrible. Taking that active choice of, hey, I see what I'm doing. Let me figure out what my triggers are. Let me figure out what sets this off. Instead of blaming them, okay, let me just recognize them. Can I change those? Great, if I can. I'll go ahead and do my best to change those. If I can't, now I need to work on some different coping skills and some different mechanisms for experiencing those things, taxes, death, all those things that are going to happen no matter what, that I cannot get rid of, that bring out that more difficult side of me, that bring out those patterns of behavior that I don't want to see. Go, okay, what skills do I need to be able to react to this differently? What skills do I need to be the better person that I want to be? And we can use those people in our life that have been terrible. Gosh, I never want to do that, which somebody did to me. I never want to do that to someone else. What skills did they need in order to not do that in that moment? Can I develop that in myself preemptively and start to really take, and people will use mindfulness and all these different things, but start to really take a look at what matters most to me and how do I develop the skills to be able to reach those goals?
I'm of the opinion that you can like anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I've tried to talk myself out of these, off the toxic ledge or being the toxic person, by just stopping and saying, okay, what is it about this person that I like? I know there's something here annoying me, but there's something here that I can like. And I'm going to center in on that and kind of use that as my frame of reference. And that's helped me make a change. But I've never really, I'll get your opinion on this. I don't ever want to make a change unless there's some sort of apology that goes with it, some sort of acknowledgement, because you don't want to come in the next day and, hey, we're great. It's like, yeah, I was a jerk before. And I know I was a jerk before. And I'm sorry I was a jerk before. And I will try and do better. But that's kind of been my strategy to try and move forward and kind of pull myself out of it.
So to make sure I understand, you're saying to make a change in yourself, you feel there should be an apology first, then make the change in yourself, and then present that change forward. I just want to make sure I understand.
Well, I guess I think the apology comes second. The apology needs to be after you recognize, hey, I got an issue, right? I'm not treating this person fairly, and it really doesn't matter why you're not treating them fairly. You're treating them unfairly, right? Unless they're toxic in their own right, and that's triggering you. But if they're just normal people and you're just using your power dynamic normal's relative, I get it. But if they're not a bad actor in any reasonable way, I feel I need to come to grips with, okay, there's a way I can like this person, and I just have to center in on that. They have a mom like I have a mom. They have a family that loves them like I have. What is it? That they love dogs. Well, I love dogs. And so then you've kind of made that change. But I just don't want to approach the situation with, okay, now I've changed how I'm going to treat them, without giving them some sort of context that, what, yeah, you're seeing a change and I've acknowledged whatever. I'm sorry. I don't want to get into why they triggered me, because it doesn't matter really.
Sure. Yeah, and that's a good point. I think starting with that apology of, hey, I'm recognizing this in myself. I'm taking this moment of humility to go, yeah, I did mess up. I could have done this better. I'm recognizing I could have done it better. This is how I'd like to do it better. Does this match for you? Going forward, would this be a better way to interact with each other?
Yeah.
That's pretty powerful. I think something that I might consider challenging in this moment would be what would make somebody a bad actor or toxic to a point where they wouldn't be worthy of that. So we start thinking about who are the people in this world that often are pushed to the side. So we talk about, say, people who are offenders or people who have done something incredibly violent or what have you, and going, is there gray in that space? Because if there's gray for me, for my goods and bads, is there gray for them? And find, even if I never meet them, if I can find within myself the humanity to find a part in them to connect with, what could be considered the for lack of better words, darkest or most depraved or what have you, behaviors that have come out of these folks. If I can find that connection there, like you said, Frank, you could then find connection with just about anybody.
Yeah.
As a human. Behavior can be really fantastic and be really horrendous. But if I can learn to find connection and find that gray area with anyone, I can really learn to, first of all, care about myself in those moments that are tough, and also make that next step of, wow, you're someone that's really hard for me, but I can definitely still connect with you and we can make this work for this moment.
Yeah. Well, and the phrase "make this work" in and of itself is kind of relative. The family member that I guess the child that lives with you, to make this work, it might be another 10 years. Who knows, right? And then they grow up and whatever, usually kind of mellow out and become more like you. But the coworker you're seeing 8 hours a day is different than the vendor or the client that you see 8 minutes a month. So you have to kind of measure all these things. Okay, what do I need to do? And it's relationships. They're not easy. That's why you have a damn business, right?
Yeah. And something to consider too is it is just as helpful and as kind to release a relationship as it is to keep it in many cases. I can sit here and try until I get bitter. Or I can go, you know what, my healthy boundaries, the things that I've set in place, that I've put forward and communicated clearly, have been consistently stepped over, consistently kicked around. It'll be healthier for both of us if we separate from this, and doing that in a congenial way. I mean, you think about any breakup, if only when we were teenagers.
Yep.
We had a nice, kind breakup, and now you've got, texting and Snapchat and all that, making it so much worse. But if we could just have that maturity as adults to go, wow, this is not a space, like I can see the humanity in me, the humanity in you, and we need to be separate from each other. This is not a space where we can meet together, is in itself kindness.
What are some strategies for doing that? I mean, I guess, for me, it's almost ghosting. I mean, maybe that's a horrible thing to admit, but it's almost like, okay, you know what, I just choose not to. And again, if it's family members, that's hard, right? I mean, that's abrupt.
Yes.
If it's a vendor, you just use a different vendor, right? Or you just, hey, I can't serve you as a client anymore. Obviously, if it's an employee, then you really kind of need to deal with it in a formal way. But a lot of times, you just kind of disappear. You don't look for those opportunities to be with. I don't know. What are some strategies that you've seen or would recommend that,
Absolutely. Yeah. When you're looking at, okay, this relationship isn't working. This may be something I need to step away from. You can go straight to ghosting. I've certainly done that. I for myself, I go, maybe not my most, how do you say, graceful
right,
of going about it. But if you start with setting those boundaries really clearly from the beginning, you can be in a better spot for, these were clearly set, expectations weren't made. So it's sort of similar to the employee and the supervisor relationship of, here are my expectations, they haven't been met, here are metrics saying they haven't been met, we'll need to step away from each other. You can do that in any personal relationship, of course, in a less paperworky way, because you don't want to do that with your spouse, but push them away immediately. But there's a couple different things you can think about. Dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, has a wonderful tool called Dear Man. You can Google it. It's all over the place. It's a basic way of going through and setting a healthy boundary and communicating it. Another great one is to look at nonviolent communication. There are some wonderful YouTube videos that give you the basis through there. on how to communicate your genuine need in this moment in a way that will get you in assertively, not passively to the point where you're, oh, I kind of, if you could, or aggressively, why don't you, get it really clearly out there so that everyone knows what the expectation is and we can either meet it or not. Again, if we're consistently not meeting it, then it's time for us to look at a blessing release of sorts.
Yeah. I mean, there was somebody that I had ghosted. This is in the last couple of years, and I was just kind of fed up, right? Just fed up. I don't
Absolutely.
need to be interacting with them. They're not a vendor. They're not a client. They're just somebody to do a lot. Zoom has really kind of opened lots of doors to wonderful relationships, and a few that aren't so wonderful as well. And so it was just like, yeah, I'm just kind of move on. And the person just kind of kept coming back into my life. And I just realized, you know what, maybe it's my role to befriend this person, and maybe not that I'm trying to change anybody. Maybe I can learn something from them. Maybe what they need in their life is they need me. I know that sounds horribly pompous, but they need somebody who, hey, that's not good. What you did's not good. Let's be friends and we can joke about these things. But when you're meeting somebody new, that's not good.
Sort of an accountability partner of sorts.
Yeah, but an unwilling accountability partner, meaning there's been no ground rules, right? This is what we're doing. It's just a stealth accountability partner, if you will, I guess, right?
Yeah, this might be a good time to talk about consent. So like the first time we met, I told you, Frank, I'm a behavior analyst. And do you remember your response?
Not really, but go ahead.
Are you analyzing my behavior? Right?
Yeah. Okay.
It's so good. I get it all the time. And I told you, no, I can't do that without consent.
Okay, that's right.
Skills in and of yourself, Frank. You've got a lot of skills to be able to connect people, to be able to look at what they're doing in businesses, how they're relating to other people, and going, this is a fantastic skill that you have. And gosh, and I do it too. I'm like, if I could just still help you just a little bit, we'd both be happier. And at the same time, we can start going, well, is that right for me to do? Is there an ethical consideration here where I go, okay, I really do need to set the ground rules here. I really need to have this conversation with you. And if you say, yes, please, dear God, call me out on my BS, fantastic, let's go with that. And again, if you say, no, what are you doing? Back off. Well, great, we've got another healthy boundary that we attempted to put in place. We tried to have open communication and it fell to the floor. Now, this is a little bit on the extreme communication side, because that's what I teach and that's what I do. So many people will go, I don't want to live in that world where we talk through everything and we set ground rules for everything. And that's okay.
Right.
But I'm simply challenging from that direction of, hey, this is an option.
Yeah. Well, I think am I actually trying to change them? Well, I think we all change everybody. I mean, I look at like the planets and gravity, or stars and gravity, where there's this constant pull, right? And the moon's going around the earth, because of gravity, it's trying to pull away. And, you step into a room and that room changes you and you change the room. And it's just a question of, how much, but it definitely changes you. And so I think with respect to this particular relationship, I just kind of made the decision that, I'm just going to be direct about my feelings. Because I can't change anybody. They have to decide they're going to change. But I can be direct in a very polite, sometimes joking way. That wasn't good.
Absolutely.
And some of the responses I've gotten are, yeah, okay, I need to work on that. Or, yeah, I know, but I'm not going to change. And this is all the same person, and there's just it's boundaries, right? I'm going to do this. Yeah, I can see what you're saying here. I can tone that down.
Sure.
And if he's listening to this, he'll know exactly who he is.
Hello, friend.
Yeah, no, he's a great guy. He is. I like him. I like him. I like him a lot. And I'm glad that I, made the decision to be friends with him, because I learn a lot from him, and not just things I shouldn't do, but he's a very direct person, and I'm realizing, I should be a little more direct. Maybe not that direct, but I should be a little more assertive. And so we can kind of,
Sure.
I can candy coat my assertiveness, and he can try and candy coat his. But I think we're both growing as a result of it. This is all science, right?
Yeah. A lot of what you're describing falls into what's called relational frame theory, and how we connect our language to how we relate to the world. Like you said, we walk into a room and the room immediately changes. It's really, really neat if you go deep into it.
Well, I tell people that, and it's, they don't believe me. It's like, well, you go to a sporting event and you tend to stand up for the national anthem. You're not doing that at home when the national anthem's playing. It's what group conformity, and it's and that's on a larger scale, but it happens on a smaller scale too. That's just little things that we don't know is happening.
Rule governed behavior is incredibly strong. Anybody who's run into a table and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and gone, "Why am I talking to a table?"
Right.
Just because you're used to doing it. So it's the rule of politeness has been extended a little extra far because the trigger happened to be an inanimate object this time.
Right. Let's shift gears. Let's talk about applied behavioral happiness and things you do, clients you're looking for, how the listener could help you.
Absolutely. So I mostly help in behavior therapy, as you said. So when we've got, when we see that we're moving away from our values, when behaviors are coming up, especially in kids that are challenging or that are really, really difficult to see, everything from my kid is whining about everything to they're trying to kick the windows out of the car on the highway. Pretty wide swath. The biggest thing for me right now is the pandemic has brought me many, many clients, more than I can handle. So I'm doing my best to be able to find the perfect fit for me and make sure that I refer everyone else out. Now, what I love about that is I do a free discovery call for everyone, and I'll know within probably 3 or 5 minutes if I'm going to be the perfect one for you, or if we need to make a referral out. I have a ton of connections. So if you know anybody who needs support, scheduling one of those free discovery calls not only helps me because I'm able to make sure I'm finding the perfect client fits, but it'll help the world get the support that it needs right now, because there aren't many people willing to take that little bit of time to connect with other resources. And it's something that's really close to my heart, taking that time for free to be able to just make sure people are going the right direction.
So the pandemic has really kind of set us up. What I'm hearing is the pandemic has really kind of triggered us, if you will, or when I say us, just society in general. Some people are dealing differently. Is this something that we get back to normal, or is this the new normal, or do we not know at this point?
What I'm seeing, and this is anecdotally from me, but I'm also hearing this anecdotally again from others. We just simply don't have all the data to put our finger on a strong, like, hey, here's the article that lines up with it, is when we're looking at kids, we're about 2 years behind. So my 18-year-olds have the social emotional skills of about a 16-year-old. My 4-year-olds of about a 2-year-old, and everywhere in between. So when we start to look at how is this going to affect us, my hypothesis is that we're going to have a generational shift where kids that were born up until about, this is my guess, 21, 23 are going to be pretty affected by this for their life. And then we'll see how quickly that is able to be sort of caught up with, like, are we able to catch up on those skills? Are we able to move ahead and get back to a quote unquote normal or a baseline? Or is it something that we see throughout life with effect as a long-term trauma? And then the next generation, as the pandemic wanes, how does that affect them? How kids were born in a world where everyone only half their face is shown will react slightly differently than kids that were born in a world where a whole face was shown most of the time.
Yeah, interesting.
What were they supposed to?
Yeah. Well, you would think there would be some sort of catching up at some point in time. I mean, the difference between an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old is 2 years. But the difference between a 68-year-old and a 66-year-old is still 2 years, but the percentages are vastly
Absolutely.
different. The development. And I can see somebody being 68 talking to another 68-year-old saying, "Oh my gosh, you're acting like a 66-year-old." Well, what does that even mean at that point, right?
Very true. It's the young ones that are most affected. And when
Yeah.
we're talking trauma in general, there's a fantastic book by Oprah and Dr. Perry that just came out called What Happened to You? And he talks about the difference in duration of trauma and amount of trauma depending on age and how it affects brain chemistry and behavior moving forward. The younger you are, like you said, the higher percentage of your life that was affected by that, the more affected you'll be long term.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of there's all sorts of trauma, right? You're a car accident and your neck's all messed up. That's very visible. I think a lot of the trauma that's out there, people don't even know they have. I think we've all had a degree of trauma. I find myself on a heightened alert on a lot of things. So I don't know. It's fascinating. I think you're going to be busy for a while.
Yes.
I
think so.
And I'm happy for you. That's not necessarily a good thing for society, or maybe it is because you're fixing things, you're helping to fix things. And so I guess it's a win-win. And I don't want to wish you not to have a job.
No, that is my job, to work myself out of a job as quickly as possible. If I can get somebody in and out in less than 12 weeks, I am elated. That is my big goal. Get you in, get you what you need, get you moving on. I am a temporary crutch, which is fantastic to use when you have a broken leg. But if you can heal that leg, stop using the crutch, keep it moving.
Yeah, I hear you. Best way to get a hold of you, best way to would be going through the website, appliedbehavioralhappiness.com, that they could schedule through there. And
absolutely. There's request appointment buttons all over it. You can also send an email through there. There's a lot of different ways on that website to get a hold of me.
Kelly, I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much, Frank. I had a blast.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.